Hello, humans. This is a case study from the latest person I've been translating a lot of. Her name is Gù Déhuá. She was a Qing dynasty doctor and she wrote her case studies up. This one is about summer heat condition in a pregnant patient. And, one of the reasons I like it is because, sometimes we see people just treating stuff like back pain or insomnia, which is wonderful to be able to treat. But, in back in the mid 19th century and before, there were lots of really serious diseases that could kill people that were being treated with Chinese medicine. So, mm, this she has one book which I've translated that has, I think, 29 cases with multiple, sessions in each case. But I, after I translated that, I found that she has a 6-volume book. These books were hand copied, and the 6-volume one was never published until last year, until 2023. Even though it was written in the mid 19th century. And it was hand copied and hand copied. So, people added stuff in or took stuff out or edited her words as it was hand copied. But in any case, this is from the 6 volume. She calls them booklets in that edition. This is the third case in the first volume of it. So it's about summer heat falling inward and the patient's in a stupor and unable to speak. So her books, even though there are different versions of them since they were hand copied, her books are called Medical Cases from the Flower Charm Studio. And my 1-volume translation of it will be published hopefully before the end of 2025. Anyway, by the way, the picture on the cover, the artist was Huāyùn Liu. Yeah, I thought that was a nice picture. So anyway, okay, so when I went to school, I thought summer heat was just like heat stroke and sunstroke, unless it combined with dampness, and then it could be a bunch of other things. But in Wenbing terminology, summer heat can be, not just heat stroke or sunstroke, but a bunch of other conditions like epidemic type conditions. And here this patient, Ms. Pan, is having one of these epidemic things. It's not just heat stroke or sunstroke. And she happens to be pregnant. She's in the 6th month of pregnancy. She's 31 years old. And she fell ill and she had mild chills and severe fever. So we know this is external attack since there's both fever and chills, but the fever is severe. So it's on the hot side, probably. We'll see, it is. Besides, she's in the Jiangnan region, the southern part of China. So, heat is more common than cold. Sorry. And so the fever abated, but not completely. So it went down. It had already lasted for 20 days. Can you imagine 20 days of having a fever? Then she says it was continuous without abating, which seems a little bit not the same as what was just said. But anyway, she's had the fever for 20 days. And so she's suffering vexation and agitation, the irritability and fidgetiness when you have heat or fever, and clouded spirit. So her consciousness is not clear. She also had countless of this thing by Pei, miliaria alba, which here, this is what it's supposed to look like. It's a skin condition that happens with certain Wenbing kind of diseases. It wasn't really talked about until the Wenbing doctors started talking about it. And there is an issue, this actually says scrofula, but she probably meant countless, because you can see these are countless, and scrofula doesn't make sense here. She never mentions scrofula again. So, books have typos. or misspellings. Anyway, so for the past 2 days and nights, this Ms. Pan was in a stupor, unable to speak. Her eyes scurried upwards. It seems like they were rolling back. And, that's like a bad sign. Her face was green and pale, and her skin was burning hot. This was worse at night. And sometimes she even laughed to herself. There was also a white foam in her mouth, and she vomited roundworms. Her bowel movements had circumfluence. So what is circumfluence? That's also a thing that's talked about in Wenbing. So there's constipation, there's like dry stool that's stuck there, but then there's liquid that is able to flow around. Circumfluence means flow around, that flows around the dry stool. So she has diarrhea, but she's still constipated at the same time. And so also her urination was short and scant because heat damages fluids. Her right pulse was surging and rapid at both guan positions. The right was also somewhat wiry. Her tongue was crimson with a yellow coat. So crimson is intensely red, high fever with a yellow coat. The center of the tongue was dry and cracked, damage to fluids. Her lips were dry but pale, okay, and her upper teeth were like dry boards. In a critical condition like this, I came up with a temporary plan to rescue her after carefully examining the disease source. So, in other words, she's not treating the root right now. She's just trying to save her life and keep her alive and get her a little more stable before she can start really trying to treat the root. Initially, her condition, she's had this for 20 days. Initially, her condition was caused by summer heat. Okay, so there's summer heat damp and there's summer heat, which just means pure summer heat. So the summer heat was brewing in the yin level or the yin division, but summer heat and wind were fettering the lungs Wei level or Wei division. So she's got both an exterior thing and an interior thing. Both yin and Wei are affected as far as, the 4 levels of Wenbing. Wenbing doctors were all from her same area, which is called Wumen, and it's like the Suzhou area. And so, she quotes from Ye Tianche frequently and the other Wenbing doctors. And so, this is a Wenbing case using Wenbing terminology. So the disease started before the autumn equinox. Back then, 20 days ago, the evils were latent but not deep. In other words, they were kind of hiding inside, but they were still more at Wei level and not at Ying at that time. The treatment method should have been to first resolve the Wei wind and then clear heat in the Ying, and then she could have recovered. But the doctors that she had randomly described it as summer heat, wind, dampness, and heat, all in Xiaoyang and Yangming, which is kind of like mixing terminology. He's doing a Shanghan thing, except it's heat, not cold. And so he mistakenly used Chaihu to first upbear liver, gallbladder, qi, and fire. So why would you want to carry qi and fire up? Fire rises on its own. Liver, gallbladder tend to have too much rising. Of course, Chaihu does talk to liver, gallbladder, and Xiaoyang, but she actually really disliked Chaihu and almost never used it. Anyway, so he followed after using a Chaihu formula. He used Huanglian and Hopo to, which made cold on the exterior and dryness damaging stomach. So Huanglian is cold. So the cold is like holding the interior wind and kind of constraining the interior wind, the exterior wind. And, these are also herbs that dry. And so her stomach fluids are dried up. And so that doctor wasn't able to push the evils out, but he did damage yin fluids. And so now liver yang was rising up, and there was phlegm fire because heat probably congealed the fluids, and these ascended and carried the evils upward, forcing them deeper inside into the yin division. So now she has vigorous fever because there's heat in yin, but no sweating because she has some cold constraining the exterior wind. Okay, so she can't sweat because cold contracts the pores. It's complex, but this is a serious case, and it's complicated by her pregnancy. So here's a statement, not just for this case, but a general statement. Cold damage evils, Shanghan evils, are transmitted and mutate through the 6 leg channels. So in other words, when we talk about Shaoyang pattern, we're mostly talking about gallbladder, not Sanjiao. When we talk about, Taiyang pattern, we're talking about urinary bladder, not small intestine, and so forth. But evils are first transmitted through the hand channels in summer heat conditions because, heat is yang and the upper body is yang. So I guess they resonate with each other. Generally, summer heat wind first assails the lungs, and if it's not treated promptly, it's very easy for it to move horizontally into the Shinbao or the pericardium. All the Wenbing books talk about heat sinking into the pericardium, and of course the lungs are surrounding the pericardium region. So, that transformation can happen, and then that's really, really serious. So, based on today's combined symptoms and pulse, it was clearly summer heat falling inward towards the pericardium, or she says the Han Jue Yin channel. Wei level wind was able to discharge through that rash, the miliaria alba. So that rash was looked at as some of the problem leaving the body. For now, I used herbs to moderate and attend to the qi division, but I'll quickly shift to dissolving summer heat by enriching and nourishing blood. This is borrowing strength from an indirect source. So that thing here, this phrase right here, is a chengyu. It's a saying in Chinese. It has to do with a military thing where I didn't really figure out the whole story, but they used, some unexpected source of strength in order to defeat the invader. And so she's saying nourishing blood is not what you'd expect, but she's going to use that to get rid of the invader. That's the indirect source. So then she has formulas. This is like a long case. And I'm not going to go over every formula, but this has things like Xi Jiao because of the intense heat, and Ling Yang Jiao because anti-wind. And then, it has plant herbs as well, to cool the blood and to clear heat and, so forth. You can I'm not going to talk about every formula, but you can pause the video if you want to spend some time examining it. So, okay. So this is still the first session, and so that's the formula. But at the time, it was difficult for her to swallow a decoction. They told me that the day before, her previous doctor, who they seem to have fired because he didn't do a good job and get results, Dr. Wang Lan Po, he's not famous. I think I Googled him and didn't come up with anything. Anyway, he prescribed a ginseng decoction. Now, I don't know if Renchen Tong was the name of a specific formula or if she's just saying a decoction with ginseng in it. But when she tried to swallow it, she just vomited back up instantly. So she wasn't able to swallow even a single drop. And they just decided he was a useless doctor. So now they've hired Gù Déhuá. So why was she unable to swallow it? Extreme heat in the yin division with uncontrolled ascent of liver yang. So stomach qi was also moving upward, and so she couldn't swallow even a drop. And so that's a problem. How is Dr. Gu going to give her medicine? So here's how she did it. I initially had her drink 3 spoonsful of melon syrup. So that's not a specific thing. So guajiang, gua can mean melon, but it can also mean like squash or cucumber. And so this could be something like cucumber that's been pulverized and maybe a little water added. So it's like a cucumber smoothie, or it could be, some kind of sweet melon smoothie, could be bitter melon smoothie, jiang. It's translated here as syrup, but it's some kind of thick liquid. And so just 3 spoonsful of, melon and cucumber cooling. And she was able to swallow it. So this showed Dr. Gu that when she was able to cool liver and stomach qi, then qi could descend when it was cooled. So then she used white lotus flower dew. So a dew is some kind of distillate, like distilling white lotus flower. So it's, a liquid that's going to be cooling. And then as soon as she took it, she followed with the formula that was on the previous slide, or maybe it was 2 slides back. So, what she was doing is every time she was going to take more of the formula, she'd take this really cooling white lotus flower dew and then swallow some formula. And then the next dose, take more of the dew and then swallow the formula. And that way she could get it down. That's pretty clever, isn't it? Okay, so that was the first encounter, and that was yesterday. Okay, so yesterday she was able to take the herbs that Dr. Gu prescribed. Fortunately, she was able to swallow all of them. And so the herbs may help. Last night, it seemed like she was sleeping, and the heat in her muscles was a little bit less. Her eyes were not scurrying upward, but they were still staring straight ahead. So, these are neurological symptoms. She's still in very bad shape. Her mind was confused and she frequently laughed to herself. She couldn't stick out her tongue and her speech was not clear. She picked at her clothes and at the bed. That's another neurological symptom. So the heat still blazed in the yin level and the evils were almost in the pericardium, she thought. Okay, so we should use a couple of formulas to free and clear deficiency in the fu. Does that really make sense? I don't know. But you may know that Huang is like cow bile stones. Is that what it is? Something like that. And that's like used in emergency situations. So is this Zhibao Dan. But you can Google them if you want to know more. Wait, sorry, did I? Yeah. Okay. So, she wanted to use aromatic herbs to open the orifices. What did she say? She said we should use these herbs, but that doesn't mean she did, because she feared aromatic herbs to open the orifices since this woman was pregnant, 6 months pregnant, and she was afraid that if she used these aromatic herbs, it would cause a miscarriage, stir up the fetus, cause a miscarriage, or that evil heat may take advantage of her deficiency. And, right now it's in the fu organ. She, has, problems with bowel movement and eating and heat in the fu organs, but she doesn't want it to get into the yin organs, which would make it even more bad. So we should still follow the same thing we did yesterday. And perhaps she's hoping she might have an episode of mania or eruption of rashes as a way for the evils to be thrust out through the exterior. She hopes this can become a turning point. So that's an interesting phrase. I think probably if you've been studying Chinese medicine, you know that, for example, if somebody has measles, you want the rash to be expressed outward to help the evils and the toxins leave the body. And so she already said the miliaria was, thrusting out some of the evils through the exterior. So she's hoping for more eruption of rashes, but also this episode of mania as a way for the intense heat evils to move out of her body. I never heard that. That's pretty interesting. That's pretty amazing. She's already laughing at herself and muttering unclearly to herself, but that's not mania. And so let's see what happens. Okay, more formula that's, I don't think too different from the previous one. You can pause and look at it if you want. So the third encounter, that was in the morning, and now she's come back in the evening of the same day. Her mental state, her pulse, and symptoms were similar to this morning. Now the patient seems to be talking more. The fetal origin had stopped moving. So this term fetal origin, I've come across it in her writings, and if you Google it, it's kind of unclear. Sometimes it's said to be the placenta, sometimes it's said to be the fetus itself, sometimes it's said to be like the whole deal, the uterus, the fetus, the placenta. Sometimes it's said to be the mother's chi that nourishes. There's not a clear definition of this term. But here, the fetal origin had stopped moving. That sounds like just she's 6 months pregnant. That's enough. That's late enough that she could feel movements of the fetus. And so the fetus has stopped moving according to the patient, which is a bad sign. But Dr. Gù says this was probably because her mental state was unclear, so she couldn't tell the difference if the fetus was moving or not. And so Dr. Gù, I determined there was no damage to fetal chi, probably through the pulse. So the patient says the baby's not moving, but the doctor says, no, everything's okay so far. No miscarriage at this point. Her hot diarrhea had stopped, but liver wind had not been extinguished. So we need to prevent convulsions and loss of consciousness. The morning formula was still okay. And so she, had one cooking of it in the morning, and then this afternoon, a second boiling of the same formula. That's how I understand this. In addition to that, take 6/10 of a qian of lianzhu fun, which is pearl powder. There are other names for it, but this lianzhu is pearl. This is pearl powder. So divide it into, 2 doses and mix it with this white lotus flower dew that she was taking. The fourth encounter was the next morning. So she's been going twice a day since she started treating this patient. She suddenly suffered reversal counterflow, 坠逆, which probably means loss of consciousness and convulsions, during between 3 and 7 a.m. But after an hour, she became conscious again. She had renewed strength, and she sat up, and now she has manic raving, cursing, and hitting people, and she bit her own fingernails all the way down to the quick. So remember, Dr. Gù said that there should be mania or rash to release some of the heat through the exterior. Well, here's the manic thing. Currently, though, because that was earlier in the morning, currently her mental state had stabilized a bit, not totally. The good news was that her pulse was less rapid, so some of the heat was released. The heat in her yin finally had a chance to discharge externally through the mania. I only disliked that her pulse wasn't deep. Okay. The long illness had damaged yin, and the liver had absorbed kidney yang. So, the liver doesn't have much yin and it has extra yang, not good. I feared that evil and right had disengaged with each other. You want right chi fighting against the evil, but it seems like the right chi has retreated or something. So it's still critical right now. This patient might die. Again, another formula. This is again a type of rhinoceros horn, and some muli to, let the wind down, and the Yangling Jiao, the, anti-wind herbs, and Go Tung, another name is Go Go. A lot of anti-wind herbs and so forth. Okay. So after taking the morning formula, her raving, so again, she's coming twice a day. I think this is 5 times in 3 days. She's been there because she started in the afternoon or evening of the first day. Okay, so after taking the morning formula, her raving began to decrease in the afternoon. Her pulse became calmer. The fetal origin was still healthy. So the storm seems to have stabilized, the storm referring to the intensity of the wind and so forth. And there's no need for a different formula. So, we want to nourish stomach yin by frequently giving her a clear drink made from glutinous millet. So I don't really know what that is. It might be like making rice porridge, except it's millet porridge and then straining out the clear liquid, as opposed to the solids, and that can help. Nourish stomach yin. Okay. So the next morning, she was able to sleep more peacefully last night, and she no longer mumbled in her sleep. The heat in her muscles had decreased, and her mental state was much more clear. The evils in the pericardium had gradually dissolved, meaning her mental state was more clear. This was good news. She felt palpitations, epigastric oppression, and difficulty spitting out phlegm. So these 2 words are pronounced the same, but one of them means wrist and the other means epigastric. So I never heard of wrist oppression. Sorry. So I think that, this is a typo. It's a word that's easily confused. Anyway, she was thirsty, but she still didn't want to drink. This, condition on the previous slide, the morning of the 6th encounter, this is yin deficiency, yin construction or nutritive level, whatever you want to call it. Deficiency heat in the yin. Her epigastric oppression was certainly not due to wind evils or lung B. Because remember, there was like wind evils bothering the lungs way level, along with enriching and supplementing, because, the previous doctor had been supplementing, and, that was not what she needed at the time. Instead, it was due to stomach fire counterflowing upward. Because the medicine today is so different from yesterday, then she wants to tell you what her idea is. She planned to enrich yin, so a little bit more supplementing than before, and assist by clearing heat and rectifying the yang ming, the stomach and intestines, hoping to bring a better situation soon. So, here's her formula. It has American ginseng, which nourishes yin. And, it does have a lot of different herbs that weren't in the previous formula, but it still has, the antelope horn to prevent wind. And yeah, you can pause and look at it. Okay, so 7th encounter, residual heat and lodge stagnation were both steaming the yang ming, the stomach and intestines. She was sweating at times. Remember, in the beginning, there was cold on the exterior. She couldn't sweat. So the muscle heat was a little better, because when you sweat, then that can cool it. But the heat in her forehead was not completely gone. At night, she woke up whenever qi and fire ascended, and was irritated when she woke up. Her throat was dry and painful, and she had no hunger. She wasn't asking for food. She had flatulence, but still no bowel movement. The diarrhea had stopped, but there was that circumfluence, which meant that there was old dried stool blocking the food organs. And so she was passing gas, but no bowel movement. Her tongue was red, but it was less red than before. It had been scarlet. The root had a thick yellow coat. Her left pulse was harmonious and calm, but her right was slippery and rapid. And so now she's talking some herbal theory. In one school of thought, this would be described as turbid junk in the foo, like stool and so forth. Turbidity in the foo was stuck, was not free flowing. So the heat was lingering with the stool. If we use a Changchi Tang descending method, descending means inducing a bowel movement, then that would get rid of the turbidity in the foo and the residual heat. But that's not good for the fetus. She's 6 months pregnant. She doesn't want to induce a miscarriage. So we should only clear heat from the stomach and moisten the intestines. We can't descend. We can't force the stool down. If we clear heat and moisten the intestines, the stool will be more likely to move. So here's her formula, no Da Huang for this patient. She uses these do things a lot. So a distilled liquid from pipaye, and fresh lugun reeds, which was in the previous formula too, and so forth. Huoma ren to moisten the intestines, and other things that, Baizi ren both calms the spirit, but moistens the intestines. Yeah. So last night she woke up with slight sweating on her head and neck. No irritation. In the previous night, she was waking up irritated, but no irritation now. The counterflow chi in her chest and epigastric region had leveled off somewhat, so she's not having all of this counterflow. Her tongue coat was gradually dissolving. It had been thick and yellow in the back, and she could eat a bit more without vomiting. So yeah, she's getting better. Her urination, though, is still short and red because fluids are damaged. And even though she hasn't had like free bowel movement yet, the evils in her stomach were still moving downward. So she continued yesterday's treatment. Here we have again 9th treatment. She slept fairly peacefully last night. In the early morning, she wanted to eat porridge. Wow, she's hungry. That's great. She had some kind of lump in her lower abdomen, which painfully attacked upward from her rib sides. Okay. But she said that was something that had occurred before. So even she's talking coherently now. I thought, though, that this lump was due to heat in the foo binding and obstructing flow. So because flow is obstructed, the liver lost its ability to course and discharge. So that made phlegm, if chi doesn't move, fluids don't move. If fluids don't move, they can transform into phlegm, and it gets stuck because chi isn't moving. So I plan to use a modified combination of Wendan Tang and Tongyo Wan. You could look up those formulas if you want to know what's in them. Actually, looking at the herbs, there's not a lot here from Wendan Tang, but there is Juru, which is in Wendan Tang. And so anyway, fresh Buddha's hand, that fruit. But the white part, like the inside of a peel, a citrus peel has a white part. Yeah. She used fresh Buddha's hand a lot. Okay, 10th, treatment. I'm sorry, I know this is long, but the patient is getting better, right? The chronic pain had moderated some, but her bowel movements were bound and dried up at Yumen, which is a name for the pylorus. It's also the name of kidney 21. She expected, though, that the bowel movement would be free the next day. Currently, I cannot hurriedly descend to preserve yin. Okay, so descend is really the word for inducing a bowel movement. Some of you use the word purge or something like that, but the word is literally descend, because the stool should move down. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that, this inducing a bowel movement has a strong descending qi. And of course, not only here, I mean, that's important in general to understand that's what we're doing is forcing things downward. But especially since she's pregnant, she can't force things downward. But this is actually a phrase that from another case, I had to look it up, Google it and figure it out. And this hurriedly descending to preserve yin is, here we have hurriedly descending, preserve yin is a way that the Chengqi Tong formulas are described, because you quickly induce a bowel movement, quickly gets the heat out of the body, and then the fluids are preserved because the heat is gone. But she can't use that type of formula on this patient without danger of plundering fluids in this case and inducing a bowel movement. Anyway, since the heat evils are almost cleared out, she can eat, which is good, very good. I'm going to enrich kidney yin to assist freeing and descending the stomach's gate. So, yin is moistening. When the stool is moist, it will slide through more easily. And then here, we have her formula, which you can look at on your own. Black sesame seed. And again, pipaye du. So she had an additional herbal thing this time. Separately prepared ginseng whiskers and American ginseng. Stew them together for a very long time. So low heat, a sealed container, simmer them like in a double boiler for a very long time. And then she should take this when she has a bowel movement, along with some thin rice porridge, because when you have a bowel movement, you lose some qi, and she can't afford to at this point. You lose yin when yin substance leaves the body. So she has ginseng for the qi and American ginseng for the yin that are lost when she has a bowel movement. And of course, the thin rice porridge will help nourish her. This supports the weak falling qi of the spleen. And at the same time, it helps stomach deficiency to be stronger, and it's moistening with the yin supplementation and the thin porridge. And she says, do not disregard this, because these are ordinary things. Sometimes people have an idea, if it's unusual, or if it's expensive, then it should really work well. And if it's just everyday stuff like porridge, do we really need to do that? But she says, you really need to do this. So 11th encounter, finally, she's had a bowel movement, but it was not smooth. I guess it took a long time. Maybe she had to push a lot. Maybe there's a lot of gas with it. I don't know. It just wasn't smooth, but she at least had a bowel movement. Fortunately, her qi and yin had not become deficient, which is what that last little thing with American ginseng and regular ginseng was for. Her right pulse was wiry. And then I don't really understand this. It penetrated through the floating of the chur position. The chur position shouldn't be floating. I don't really, I don't really understand. But anyway, maybe Yeah, I just don't understand that sentence. But this indicated that the qi stagnation descended and pooled in the large intestine. So the fact that the pulse was going a long way showed that things were moving downward, I guess. Her abdominal pain had stopped, but her abdomen was not harmonious. In other words, there's probably still gurgling or gas or stuff like that. She was eating a little bit more, and her tongue coat had greatly dissolved because it had been thick. Her body fluids were also becoming moist, and she was gradually entering recovery, smooth road ahead, like not so worried anymore that she's going to die or miscarry. Okay, so there's more formula. You can pause and look if you want. Yesterday, between 7 and 9 p.m., she had a bunch of bowel movements in a row, and they were free and smooth and, great. That part is fixed. Also, her urination, instead of being short and red, was clear and long. So fluids are definitely improving. All of the things that she was complaining about had gotten better, but she should be cautious with her diet and daily activities so she doesn't relapse. And of course, the herbs, you know, you can look. Um, so 13th encounter, we're almost at the end. In recent days, her stomach woke up. She was eating more. This, I don't know how, this is some days later. This is not the next day. She's not coming every day anymore. In recent days, her stomach had awakened. She was eating more. Her spirit and pulse were getting more active, but she sometimes had tinnitus and a dizzy head. So she still had some yin deficiency with liver, gallbladder, fire flaring up. So here's the formula. And this is the last treatment. And again, we don't know how much time has passed. I wish we did, but we don't. So all of her maladies have eased. Now we should supplement and smooth the flow of qi and nourish and cool blood. Hopefully her own origin will recover soon. Kidneys and so forth. If the fetal origin is full term when she gives birth, this will be a great success. So the pregnancy is still happening and it looks like the fetus is going to make it. So I think we still have a formula here, which is totally changed to things like Ujao and so forth. So, I was impressed with this case. First off, there were a few interesting things like the idea of quickly descending to preserve yin, which she didn't use because of the fetus, you can't descend, or the idea that mania could be a way to release heat out through the exterior along with rash, or, there were some other things I found interesting. Plus the idea like, wow, look how serious these cases are that doctors had to treat back then. And, this patient would obviously be in intensive care in the hospital today, but, our medicine got her through. And, I think some of us may not understand the power of our medicine because we don't have this opportunity to treat this kind of thing. Anyway, so that's a case from Gù Déhuá. You can see that she's not just a gynecologist, but she treats all kinds of things, including scary diseases where the people might die. So that's it for today.